The future is now, bringing you my week 12 rest of season rankings to help you project your team out forward into the playoffs. Starting off with my running backs, and we started off with Saquon Barkley, Bijan, CMC, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, and it is an elite level running back tier this year. If you drafted one of these studs at the top, you're feeling pretty good about your odds. There's a chance that you might have two of these guys. Saquon Barkley, he is my RB1 in full PPR rest of season. Definitely like where he's at, where he's going, where he has been. Last week against Washington, didn't look like it was going to be a Saquon Barkley game until it became a Saquon Barkley game. Now you're looking at the matchups down the stretch: Rams, Baltimore, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Washington. Some good matchups, some bad matchups, but Saquon Barkley's been getting enough volume that we do have him here. We got Bijan Robinson, aka the second coming of LaDainian Tomlinson, as our RB2 rest of season. Dude's been absolutely balling. You drafted Bijan for a reason. Besides this week 11 game versus Denver, the previous 5 weeks he had scored over 20 fantasy points. So definitely want to continue to rely heavily on Bijan Robinson, because let's be clear, he's only getting around a 70% snap share. So there is still room for him to continue to go up in the overall rest of season rankings. CMC, do I need to talk any further? If he's been fully healthy this season, we might have him up there with Saquon Barkley as RB1, RB2, but RB3 is where I'm sliding him in. Derrick Henry's been on a little bit of a down tier based on his overall performance the last few weeks, but we have seen how elite Derrick Henry has been. Only have to look back to week 9. So Derrick Henry as my RB4 here. We then got Joe Mixon sliding in as my RB5. Still got to like Joe Mixon. We saw that ultimate level value versus Dallas on Monday Night Football. We'll have to see what he does in week 12 versus Tennessee. Devon Achane, since Tua's been back, honestly, you might even make an argument that he should be higher. And then Jahmyr Gibbs here in the S tier. So I feel really great about all of these running backs in the S tier, but let's move on here to the A tier. And in the A tier, we got Alvin Kamara, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, and James Cook. And honestly, there was a part of me that said, hey, let's just throw Chase Brown at the top of this tier. Couldn't really do that because Alvin Kamara is clearly the only running back right now in the Saints offense, maybe the only weapon besides him and Taysom Hill that you can count on. Breece Hall, like we said, maybe should push lower. He got 121 yards in this loss to Indianapolis, 84% snap share. We love to see the volume that Breece got. Was an absolutely elite level performance in full PPR with 7 receptions. If this continues and somehow you maybe traded low or had held on to Breece Hall, there are brighter days ahead. It is continuing to look like. Kyron Williams, who's been a little bit of a disappointment for full PPR fantasy football. Chase Brown, like we said, wanted to debate pushing him higher, like him right here in the A tier. He was in the B tier last week, so Chase Brown is making up a push up the rankings each and every week. Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, and then James Cook, feeling really great about this A tier of running backs to round out the A tier. We move on to the B tier, and we got Jonathan Taylor, Tyrone Tracy, and Tyrone Tracy is going to be an interesting one this rest of season, especially with them going to Tommy DeVito. No Daniel Jones, didn't even go to Drew Lock because Drew Lock potentially gives them a chance to win some games. How is that going to impact Tyrone Tracy? Probably will get a lot of volume, which is great, but is it going to be good volume? We got James Conner. The question mark with James Conner is, as Trey Benson continues to get more and more run, how is that going to impact James Conner's overall fantasy football value? Last week had 22 fantasy points. The week before that had 14.9 in full PPR. So he is getting the reception still getting a lot of the work. But like we said, can James Conner continue to remain healthy at that old age is kind of where we're getting. David Montgomery splitting the backfield, high touchdown upside with Jahmyr Gibbs. Aaron Jones been a little bit of a disappointment. We've seen Cam Akers start to come on a little bit in the second half of the season. Ramondre Stevenson, and then Brian Robinson Jr. And honestly, this Commanders offense is kind of taking a step back. So I do like Brian Robinson here ending out the B tier. Move on to the C tier. And it was really hard for me between Chuba Hubbard and Brian Robinson rest of season. Have Chuba Hubbard here in the C tier. He got the huge extension, been an absolute league-winning RB2 stash player if you had him early on in the season and how he's performed to this point. J.K. Dobbins been absolutely killing it. We got Isaiah Pacheco is going to be coming back from injury either this week or next week. I felt like this was an appropriate value for Isaiah Pacheco. I know I have Kareem Hunt at the back end of this tier too, because I do think both of them going forward are going to have some sort of value. Now, I think both of them are going to hurt each other's overall upside, but I do like this for the overall Kansas City Chiefs offense. DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Bucky Irving. A lot of questions this week about where do I have DeAndre Swift rest of season relative to Bucky Irving? 2 spots ahead. Najee Harris, like we said, is playing in this Thursday night football game versus the Browns. That's how I round out the overall C tier. We move on to the D tier, and the D tier is a chocked full, and I say chocked full of running backs. We got Rachaad White, Nick Chubb, Rico Dowdle, Tank Bigsby, Jalen Warren, Travis Etienne, Austin Eckler, Trey Benson, Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, Alexander Madison. This is kind of how I have it. If you have some of these guys, you can kind of see the upside week to week. They might have some sort of flex RB2 appeal. Other weeks, they're not going to do anything for you. So that's how I have this D tier. Honestly, Rashad White versus Bucky Irving, I think they're going to continue to kind of go with that hot hand rest of the season. So that's the question. Maybe I should have put Rashad White a little bit higher, but I do feel good about where I end off in this D tier. And we move on to the wide receiver. We move on to the wide receiver front, and we started off here in the S tier. And shout out to Puka Nacua making it into this S tier. But we got Jamar Chase, who's going to be on a bye this week. That's going to hurt a lot of you that are trying to make the playoffs with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, and Nico Collins. Feel very good about this top S tier. Nico Collins hurt a lot of us last week. We need to see Nico Collins come back this week, look absolutely electric. Puka Nacua, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think you can debate between AJ Brown and Amon-Ra for that wide receiver 3 position, but I do think I feel a little bit better about Amon-Ra rest of the season, especially with the overall volume that he's getting in that Detroit Lions offense out of the slot. If you have one of these guys, you got to feel really good about it. But honestly, the wide receiver position this season has kind of failed in comparison to its RB counterparts for kind of warp, wins above replacement, but also points per game. When we get to this tier, I mean, Drake London, you feel good about it. Cooper Kupp, George Pickens, Malik Neighbors. We'll have to see how Malik Neighbors is going to fare with Tommy DeVito. I know a lot of people are a little bit worried about Malik Neighbors' overall value. I still have him here in the A tier. Have him ahead of Scary Terry, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, which is crazy. Listen, I understand Tyreek Hill. If things go right in this Miami Dolphins offense, Tyreek Hill should get pushed up all the way up to the beginning of the A, if not back end of the S, but we haven't seen it yet, ladies and gentlemen. Last week was an okay game with 18 fantasy points, but going forward, I need to see a little bit more out of Tyreek Hill, and hopefully we get it because a lot of us drafted him in that first overall round. We move on to the B tier, and we started off with DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf has kind of been debatably overshadowed by JSN the last 2 weeks with him being injured and then coming back last week, but I'm fairly, very confident in DK Metcalf leading off the B tier. Zay Flowers has essentially put Deontay Johnson in his place. A lot of us, if you sold low on Zay Flowers, I'm so sorry. A lot of us were worried about what Deontay Johnson was going to do to this Baltimore Ravens offense, but dude's been absolutely elite. Have him here in the B tier. T. Higgins has continued to be a method of consistency when he's on the field. Now, he hasn't been consistently not injured because he's been pretty hurt this year, but when he has played, been absolutely electric, helping out his overall free agent value going forward. Him, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow are like the only people in this offense that are worth watching, and Chase Brown. Let's not forget Chase Brown. Juwan Jennings leading off the top San Francisco 49ers. I told someone yesterday, it's hard for me. A lot of people are wondering, should I trade Deebo Samuel for Juwan Jennings if you still have the trade deadline open? It's hard for me not to say Juwan Jennings. I think sometimes I lean Deebo, sometimes I lean Juwan Jennings, but when I put together my rest of season rankings, had to put Juwan Jennings and what he's put on the field ahead of Deebo. Then we got Marvin Harrison Jr., CeeDee Lamb, even with his lack of quarterback play, and then good old Lad McConkey. We then move on to the C tier, and we have Jaden Reed, Mike Evans, Deebo, who we were just talking about, JSN, who's continued to make a push up the rankings. Think we could continue to see JSN next week appear in the B tier. Darnell Mooney, who's on bye, but has been super electric for the wide receiver 2 for the Atlanta Falcons. Khalil Shakir, and then Devontae Adams has had a little bit of a fall from grace. He was in the B tier last week and continues to kind of fall with this Jets offense. We move on to the D tier, and shout out to a lot of these guys for falling. Devontae Smith has fallen. Cortland Sutton has made a push up. Josh Downs has fallen. Calvin Ridley has made a way up. Tank Dell is kind of staying the same. Jameson Williams and Brian Thomas Jr., who has also fallen down the overall rest of the season rankings because of the lack of quarterback play, really hindering. Mac Jones is hindering Brian Thomas Jr.'s overall upside because he was getting a ton of targets downfield. But when you have a really struggling offensive line and a struggling quarterback, what's that going to do? It's really going to hinder those deep shots. So ending the D tier, feeling okay if those guys are your wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, but like we said, we prefer some better wide receivers. And we move on to the E tier, and DeAndre Hopkins for the Chiefs. It hasn't been the Randy Moss level start that we saw in that second game when he had 2-3 total touchdowns. We'll continue to monitor DeAndre Hopkins. Same with Amari Cooper. We need to see Amari Cooper really lock in with Josh Allen in this Buffalo Bills team, because I do think Amari Cooper can be that true alpha that they need to go alongside Khalil Shakir, but have him here in the E tier. Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, whenever Chris Olave potentially comes back for the New Orleans Saints. Does he come back this year? He's on the IR, so he hasn't been absolutely ruled out, but I have a feeling it's a little bit risky. So maybe we could debate Chris Olave. Should he be in this ranking? Should he not be in these rankings? Cedric Tillman, DJ Moore, and then Quentin Johnston to round out the overall E tier. F tier, we started off with Rome Odunze. Caleb Williams has been a struggle for the Chicago Bears, but have him, then Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman Jr., Romeo Doubs, Elijah Moore, Jordan Addison, Keenan Allen, and Ricky Pearsall to round out the F tier. And the last and final tier, it's going to be us over here in the E tier. So dark you can't even see it. Xavier Leggett, Christian Watson, Pop Douglas, Wandale Robinson, Jalen McMillan, Jacoby Myers, Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Worthy to round out my overall wide receivers. And there's going to be a lot of you that kind of debate this. So let me know what you disagree with down below. But if you have an agreement, let me know. Here to answer all your start sit questions this season on the way to 5,000 subscribers. Appreciate all the love and support all y'all have been given. We move on to the quarterbacks, and we start off the quarterback position with the S tier. We got Lamar Jackson, absolutely elite. Still have him as the QB1 rest of the season. Josh Allen has been an absolute cheat code as of late. Know he's on bye this week, so if you have Josh Allen, you're probably a little bit sad, especially if you're trying to make the playoffs. Jalen Hurts as the clear QB3, and then I do think, even though this is still my S tier, there should be a little bit of a teardrop between Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy. I think if you want to debate Joe Burrow versus Jaden Daniels, I think Joe Burrow has been playing better as of late. I just think I'm continuing to rely on that Konami code upside from Jaden Daniels, and maybe the NFL's figured him out. Maybe that early rush, that early magic that he had is kind of starting to die out as defensive coordinators start to realize how to plan against Jaden Daniels, but I do still have him here in the S tier. We move on to the A tier. We got Kyler Murray. We got Jordan Love. Justin Herbert has made a shooting rise up the rankings. I like where he is, his schedule rest of the season. He's also getting enough rushing upside to kind of help limit the amount of passing attempts he's having, which should, in theory, we'd hope would go up, but he is still putting up fantasy football value, so I have to have him here in the A tier. It's really just a testament to how bad these quarterbacks are pretty much post Kyler Murray. Jordan Love's been even mid here as of late. Then Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, and then Jared Goff. If you don't have an elite level quarterback, we're definitely playing a ton of matchups rest of season. Move on to the B tier, and we got Baker Mayfield, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Konami code quarterback upside, Matty Boy Stafford, Drake May, and then Sam Darnold to round out the overall B tier. You let me know what you think. I think Anthony Richardson making a reappearance in the B tier feels appropriate. If you don't have an elite level guy, I think having a guy like Anthony Richardson week to week can be scary. It's going to lose you probably a few matchups, but it's potentially going to win you the right matchups if you play him right. Then we got Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Tua Tagovailoa, and then if you have Kirk Cousins, Caleb Williams, Aaron Rodgers, you're probably not feeling any good about it. I would not feel confident starting these guys week in and week out because poor Cole's Cash Kirk. It's been a little bit rough here as of recent. We move on to the tight end position, and there's a clear 4, and we've been mixing these guys up pretty much week in and week out. We got Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and then George Kittle. Still have Brock Bowers. He was my tight end 1. I moved him back last week versus Travis Kelce, but I'm back to Brock Bowers again, and I think Brock Bowers is having an absolutely amazing rookie campaign. What would be a wide receiver, but an absolutely league-shattering rookie season for a tight end. We move on to the A tier, Cade Otton. Maybe Cade Otton should make an appearance in the S tier. I'm still waiting. Like we said, we need to see how he does this overall week in week 12. Potentially he ends up getting moved up to the S tier, but him, Evan Ingram, Taysom Hill, David Njoku, TJ Hawkinson, kind of the best of the rest. And if you don't have one of these S or A tier tight ends, probably not feeling the best about them, because then you're looking at a guy like a Jonnu Smith, who, as much as he's led the team in targets the last 3 weeks, do you feel comfortable with Jonnu Smith as your starter week in and week out? Then we got like Mark Andrews, Tucker Kraft, Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz. All these guys have had their ups. All these guys have had their downs, but this is kind of how I view the B tier. I think clearly Jonnu Smith is the guy that I would be wanting in this overall B tier. And then we move on to our last and final tier. It's the C tier. It's kind of the best of the rest. Mike Gesicki only seems to play well when there's no T. Higgins. You got Dallas Goedert, Dalton Kincaid, who's pretty much just living off of name recognition at this point. Literally has not produced for any type of fantasy football value. Probably out there on the waiver wires. Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, Jake Ferguson. Probably all should be waiver wire options if you don't have one of those top level guys. But if your trade deadline's still available, definitely go try to see if you can get an elite level tight end. So I appreciate you guys all for tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't. Absolutely appreciate all the love and support all y'all been giving me. Been the absolute best. We will be streaming tonight, Friday night. If you guys are watching this after Sunday's game, if you're watching this during week 13, like I said, a lot of these changes are going to be made. We posted this video on Friday, so we'll be making some adjustments this week on the rest of season rankings. So I appreciate you tuning in. Ask me any start sit question down below, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.